October 31st is fast upon us. The age of summer is coming to an end. And soon, all that goes bump in the night will arise. So lock your doors, close your windows, gather by the campfire, and put on your spooky attire.
What's the boogeyman?
Death has no death.
You're listening to the C-Files RetroAthon. Age of the Supernatural. Now, here are your hosts. Special Agents Spooky Clutcher and Potter Sauce.
Hello there, fellow investigators. Welcome back to the C-Files RetroAthon, Age of the Supernatural. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
And today, we are joined by two very special guests. One you know before, Michael, aka the Wolfmann from Mega MovieZ, and a personal friend of the channel, somebody who has helped us out a lot, Kyle Curtis Flett from Fletts House of Horror. How you doing, sir?
Doing good, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm very excited to get into this episode. So today, or tonight, we are going to be reviewing and discussing John Carpenter's masterpiece, Halloween, 1978. So, what can we say about this movie that hasn't already been said? Well, pretty much nothing. But we are here to give our opinions on the matter, because this movie is legendary for so many reasons. It is not the first slasher film, but I would say that it is the slasher film that pushed slasher films into the mainstream. It gave birth to characters like Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, among many others. And Michael Myers as a horror icon is still relevant to this very day, obviously because we have Halloween 2018 as well as Halloween Kills. So Michael Myers has a very long legacy, and I'm very excited to discuss this first film that started it all. So, Michael Myers is a very interesting character for me because this film presented him as a complete mystery. He has no real motivation other than he killed his sister back in the 60s, and ever since then he's been in a mental institution or several mental institutions. And why he killed his sister, nobody knows. And then when he's older now, he escapes from the penitentiary or the mental facility that he was at, and he's going back home. And it is a good question as to why he would choose to go back home, other than, whenever you're lost or you just have that itch, you just have a desire to go back home for some reason. But, I mean, what do you guys think about Michael Myers as a character, at least how he was presented in this film?
I just think it was very short and simple. Compared to the Rob Zombie version, boo. It was plain and simple though. Like, it was like a big mystery. We don't understand why he killed though. Compared to Rob Zombie's version, he came from a broken home and he developed disturbing behaviors of killing animals, which resulted into him killing his entire family except his baby sister and his mother. That's why.
Yeah, for me, I really appreciated the way Michael was portrayed in this movie, because he was ambiguous, and all you knew was that he killed his sister, and then boom, you just know that this guy was evil and is this mass murder killer guy. That's all you know. That's literally what they give you as the premise for this character that we're supposed to be following. And I found that brilliant. but they somehow still, like I mentioned during our last podcast, they somehow still found a way to manage to find humanity within an evil character, I thought, which was really interesting. So
I agree on that, Wolfman, because it's amazing. They never done much this before. At the at the beginning, when he takes off that mask, it's a 6-year-old. No one expected that at the time. That's totally different what they have done in the past. It's a 6-year-old. What would a 6-year-old be doing with a knife? I mean, just at his iconic those eyes where he just doesn't answer them when they go, Michael. Like it's very awesome. He doesn't do it. He holds that big kitchen knife, and he has those eyes, and he doesn't say anything. And it's amazing. The mystique. It's the mystery of if you explain too much, it will just ruin the Michael character. Especially if you listen to Dr. Loomis's iconic lines he says in the Myers house. If you really listen to what he's saying instead of just because it's been used so much, if you really listen to what he's saying, that's all you need to know about Michael, and it keeps him more scary when he just goes randomly stalking Lori and all her friends, and you don't know the real reason why.
You know, one of the strengths of this film is and I'm going to use a Rian Johnson term here, a subversion of expectations, right? This movie subverts your expectations about the typical serial killer. Most serial killers, whether it be like Jason or Freddy Krueger or Leatherface or Norman Bates, they had a motive, they had a reason for doing what they were doing. Even if it was a really twisted and screwed up mentality, they still had reason to do what they did. But Michael didn't have a reason. He just did. And some people might criticize that as like being a lame excuse, like, oh, you're just saying that to write off developing a character. Well, like Carter pointed out, you had Rob Zombie's Halloween that actually gave a backstory for that version of Michael. He comes from a broken home. But that's a stereotype. I mean, that's pretty much what you would get for any serial killer. Like, oh, most serial killers come from a broken home. It's obvious. But with John Carpenter was a master of suspense and mystery. You just watch John Carpenter's The Thing, and you'll see what I mean. With Halloween, you have that in spades. You have somebody that has no real emotion. The mask really embodies who Michael is. You really can't have Michael Myers without that mask, because that mask is sort of an outward reflection of what Michael is inside. It's just blank, expressionless, no real motive. He just does what he does. And Kyle is right. When you listen to Dr. Loomis's monologue in the Myers house, that's all that you needed. Myers just had this blank, empty stare, but yet there was purpose. There wasn't motivation, but there was purpose to get out of where he was and to go back home. And I think that fear, suspense, and horror, it has a real strong point when you don't have a clear explanation for everything. Because, like with Jaws, they didn't show the monster too much because the monster looked cheap and rubbery, and it looked unrealistic. The same thing with The Thing from Another World. Now, back then, with that film, the monster looked really cheesy. So the filmmakers sort of forced themselves to have the creature shrouded in mystery. That way you never got a clear look. And that actually added to the horror.
Exactly, like the same thing in the first Friday the 13th movie, though. Like, we see from the killer's point of view, like, these two camp counselors getting stabbed, and then it keeps going on and on until we get to Alice, who is the final girl. And it turns out that the killer is actually Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother, who is on a warpath of killing horny teenagers, who blames them for his son Jason drowning, though. Instead of watching him, they just went out and just... But, yeah, compared to that, though, like, it was like a mystery until we get to the final girl that we know. Like, if we know so much about this character, like, if we get to know her, like, learn from her, or, like, she explains all this stuff to her, like, what's her passion, her other stuff, or we get to know about her, and then we realize we come to the conclusion that it's the final girl, then we know.
And I love that you mentioned The Thing, because that is my favorite horror movie of all time. I'm always going to have such a special place in my heart for The Thing. And I remember I fell in love with it because of the ending. When the ending happens, and it's so ambiguous, and you don't know who was actually the thing, and they end it in that type of way, thought that was so brilliant, and I loved it whenever I saw him perform that same ambiguity in Halloween. Because in Halloween, he made it to where once that ends, you're left wondering what happened.
It's like that perk jingle. Who's who?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, did he crawl away? Is he still alive? Did he crawl and then die? Did something what happened to him? It's like, you don't know. And that's why I loved the ambiguity of the ending to Halloween. And I feel like he kept the same mystery that he did in The Thing, just a few years later.
Yeah, that's why the ending of this film is so legendary, because I think what really sells it, there's a few things that sell it. One is the music. Okay, John Carpenter's scores are always fantastic. The Halloween theme is legendary. Then you have the performance from Donald Pleasance. And then you also have the performance from Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, where she's crying, and then when you get that shot of Loomis's face as he looks over the balcony and sees that Michael is gone, you see that face, right? That face that Loomis makes. How he looked down and he looked up, like towards the horizon, towards the outside, and he knew. He knew somehow that Michael was still alive. And that always gave me chills, especially when you have Michael breathing as you're getting different shots of the Myers house, of where Laurie was staying at, and you just had the music. That whole mix culminated into a perfect ending for the film. And that's why it's so legendary, because if you watch Cinemassacre's review of Halloween, he has a perfect scenario set up for you, where you play the Halloween film on October 31st, and when you get to the end, he says to look out your window and have the music playing in the background and the movie playing in the background, and you get immersed in the film. That you have that ominous feeling that Michael is still out there somewhere. He's still out there. And that unresolved feeling that he could be anywhere. And that's why this film is so effective with the fear. And it's not even that much of a scary movie compared to the jump scare filled movies that we have today. But that doesn't hurt the film. The film is genuinely unsettling. It's not like complete in your face, scream at the top of your lungs horror. It's the subtlety. And
yeah. I completely agree. And to me, the scariest movie ever made, in my opinion, is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh my god.
And
that's a good one.
And that's the scariest movie I've ever seen. But it's not a scary in the sense of, oh, I'm jumping, or oh, something just popped out of me, or any of that stuff. It's the fact that you feel dirty after you watch that movie. You feel gross. You feel grimy. Yeah. You are just completely just squirming.
Yeah,
in
you
your
just get
seat.
that shudder.
You are just so disturbed. And Tobe Hooper captured that perfectly to like flawlessly in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And like just when the body's twitching and like the subtlety, like the stuff like that he uses in that just made it all the more effective. And like I've always said, there's always that fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. And that's why, to me, like, the scariest of any of the Paranormal Activity movies, if you want to go down that route, is the first film. Mm-hmm. And the reason the first one's so scary is you're like, I don't know what's going on with the ghost. All you hear is these noises, and you're like, what is it doing in the other rooms? You don't know, because you don't know anything about like what is happening and stuff like that in the other rooms. And I always found that that type of horror is a lot more effective when you're subtle or when you don't know what's happening.
Right.
And so I really feel like John Carpenter was able to capture that in this film, and he was able to kind of give us so little things to where we don't know what is Michael Myers' mindset. We just know this can happen to anyone. And that exact premise there makes it utterly terrifying. And just some of the subtleties that he uses of simply just the breathing sounds or just some of the shots, him in the background, stuff like that. Just a little simple head turn as he's looking at a body that's stabbed in the wall and stuff. Just simple things like that make you squirm in your seat, disturbed. You're not jumping like, oh my God, oh, isn't that? But
you're just watching you from behind a bush.
Yeah, but you're just sort of like you have this unease feeling because they made Laurie Strode such a relatable character that you could put yourself in her shoes, and you can say like, oh my God, I could be Laurie Strode in this situation. Any person could just one night decide to come and try to kill me. And that thought process is a terrifying one to think about. So, yeah. I thought that
and that whole final scene is great because those shots where she's trying to get the keys trying to get into the Doyle house, and when he's walking down the street, she's trying to get in. That's an awesome shot. And you don't see him. He kind of stumbled a little bit when he tried to get off the curb, but he nailed that right. And then I love the false part. Like I know they're using fake leaves in the color, but they sprayed it. But she's trying to get in there. And before, I love how Tommy's just ignoring her. Like, she's screaming. He's like, oh, just a sec. But, like, really. But anyway, he gets in. And Tommy says his line. You can't kill the boogeyman. And that's a great shot of Nick Castle. That's when you really get a great shot of Nick Castle. You pan back and forth. Those shots are hard to film.
Yeah.
And Nick Castle, when he's when he's on the ground and he does his sit up and turns his head, no one was able to top his head turn like that. He does it. Other people tried to replicate it. They haven't done it since then. And then at the end, when she is crying, she finally realized it is the boogeyman. Because at the beginning, for a while, she wasn't even
didn't believe in him.
Believe Tommy. And then she asked, "Was that the boogeyman?" As a matter of fact, that was. And then she starts crying. And that whole final scene is just amazing.
I love that. They have that scene where Michael's just raising up, and it's just so smooth. Like the way he just comes up, it's just like, what did I just see? This guy he just rose up, and I'm pretty sure that scene with Michael doing that was the inspiration for the Undertaker in WWE, because Undertaker does that.
I never thought about that until you just mentioned that, but holy shit.
Now, granted, Undertaker comes up a lot faster than Michael does, but you can obviously see, the comparison and the inspiration, I think, because it is genuinely unsettling. You knock this guy out, essentially, or he passes out. He gets stabbed and then he just passes out, and then he just comes back up. He doesn't make any loud noises. He doesn't go any real grunts of pain. I mean, he does some in the film, but I mean, he just raises up and then looks at Laurie. It's just like, it's unsettling because it's not in your face horror like we talked about earlier. It's subtle. It's the creepy little things that just make you squirm in your seat. Like, my God, this is uncomfortable as hell to watch. Yeah.
You know what else is unsettling? When he's looking from Mr. Riddle's backyard, and she's facing him, and he disappears. You don't see her turn, and she's looking right at him. She never takes her face off him.
Yeah.
Like, was she imagining? And he just disappears. Like, you don't see her turn for a second, and he's gone. That's so effective scene. Like, how
You
did
know,
he
I
disappear so
wonder-
fast she didn't notice?
I wonder what actually happened with that. Like, was she hallucinating, or did he really just like? Because if you look at it, I guess you have to suspend your disbelief for that scene, because if you're just looking at a person down there, you don't take your eyes off them, and then they just all of a sudden disappear. Now, from the audience perspective, it's a very creepy moment. It's like, oh my god, where the hell did he go? But then when you think about it, you know, realistically, it's like, what happened to him? And then you start questioning, okay, was she hallucinating that? Because obviously she saw Michael by the bush when she was walking home, right? And then he just disappears. And then she sees him again. But is she having like a hallucination type thing? I don't know. I'm just speculating as to what happened with that scene. If that's just like a editing error, or they deliberately did that.
Interesting is that this film, it's always fun catching these type of mistakes. It never takes me out of the film. This film is perfect.
Yeah.
But you can always notice some like little mistakes in there. Like a boom mic is sticking out of the bush at one point and stuff like that. They never edited it out.
I know that there was one mistake. Remember the ending cutscenes of when we see like the shots, like the Halloween theme is playing in the background, and we hear Michael's breathing. Then we get like shots of rooms and places and stuff. Now in the living room, you could actually see Michael Myers' kitchen knife on the ground, like near the couch. You could see that.
And
Yeah,
I remember someone was apparently smoking on set, and you could see like the smoke coming by like her friend's face or something like that. They never edited it out, so you could see it flowing out into the screen, and that was just kind of those little subtle things there are just always just kind of funny to see. Yeah. So it's just you saying that, was it sort of like something that was meant to be there? Was an editing issue? That just kind of reminded me of.
Yeah, or a lot of tampering or contamination.
Yeah, and the Strode house that she comes home from school to.
Yeah.
It was used. That's the same house. That's the Nightmare on Elm Street house.
Really?
Yeah, it was shot there. It may have been just the stereo shots, but that was the same house that was used in the Nightmare on Elm Street house.
I never knew that. Now I'm gonna have to watch the film again and pay attention. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. I just found that out recently. It was.
That's really neat.
Oh, and let's talk about Laurie Strode. Jamie Lee Curtis, brilliant. This is not to mention that this was actually her first gig on acting. Not to mention that her mother is Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho. Isn't that cool though? And because of that movie, Jamie Lee Curtis was officially a Scream Queen. Not to mention that when it came to being Scream, after her role of Laurie Strode, she got better roles, and not to mention she was rocking a pixie cut, which looks pretty good on her.
You know, it's funny, we didn't really cover that in our Halloween 2 review, that Laurie Strode in that film is clearly wearing a wig. Because, you know, the movie was shot much later, but it was filmed, like, the setting takes place still on the first night of Halloween. I always find that to be a little iffy for filming. You know, like, if it's not like a TV series that you're constantly following a continuing storyline, and that you're doing a movie that takes place in the same time as the previous film, there's always going to be those little issues. And it doesn't take me out of the film. It's just, you can tell that she's wearing a wig. But I just want to remind us to hold on to that little bit about Janet Leigh from Psycho, because there's something Psycho related that I want to talk about when we get to Loomis.
Ooh, but I do want to mention, I'm very glad that you brought up Laurie Strode and Jamie Lee Curtis. When this franchise, she has such an appreciation for it. Not only because it was her start and everything, and it really kicked off her career. But I remember she said in some behind the scenes stuff, and when Jamie Lee Curtis speaks, you listen, because holy crap, she knows how to talk, and she is great at that. And so she was talking about how she was 19 when she filmed this.
Wow.
And John Carpenter came to her and he says, I want you to act vulnerable. And she says, I don't know what he means by that. And at the time she was like, I'm going to give it my best. I don't know what he means by that, or something like that. And then he's trying to, so she just tries her best. It wasn't until she went to the premiere and there was a certain scene towards the end, and she hears this old lady in the theater shouting, "Don't go in there!" and stuff like that. That then she realizes that what she did right, and that's what John Carpenter meant, is to make a character vulnerable that we could relate to, and that made it even more effective.
Short story about that don't go in there. Short but funny story is that me and Caleb were actually seeing this horror movie called Lights Out, and
That's so good.
we were in the theater, like we were in the front row of the theater. Well, not literally in the front row, we were in the vicinity of the front row, and we were just watching this, and like I just know that like there's jump scares coming though, and this woman, like I'm literally yelling, like I saw this moment though, like turn the fuck around, and then the entire audience just busted out laughing.
Yeah, so what happened was this was towards the climax of the film. So I forget the main character's name. It was the girl, and she was walking up the stairs, and everything is quiet. The entire audience is quiet. The movie is quiet, and up to a certain point, we get to a part in the film, and Carter just randomly screams, "Get the fuck out of there!" or "Turn the fuck around!" He said something along those lines, and everybody in the theater just broke out laughing. Everybody went in the theater just broke out laughing. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's awesome. And speaking of Jamie,
I love.
she has.
horror. Oh, sorry. I'll let you get to. I just love those like type of. That's why horror is so great. Is those type of theater experiences that we get when we see like those horror movies in the theater, and there's always that one person that just makes it the absolute best. I just love that.
Yep.
What were you gonna say, Kyle?
And speaking about her acting, she's amazing when she finally finds out that Annie is dead. Her facial expressions when she just starts crying, going to fear, and then she sees Bob and Linda. That's one of her best scenes.
Now here is a good question. Talk about acting between Laurie Strode's. What is the better acted scene? Whenever Jamie Lee Curtis finds Annie dead, or when Scout Taylor Compton as Laurie Strode finds Annie dead, and that whole scene.
Laurie Strode, like Jamie Lee Curtis, better. Are you talking about the version? Are you talking about the Rob Zombie version of Laurie Strode?
Yeah, Rob Zombie's Howling 2.
Oh hell no! I prefer Jamie Lee Curtis's reaction of finding Annie dead. Just brilliant though. It's like she's in shock though, and she she wouldn't scream her head off though, because if I saw a dead body, I would be like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah. So out of the two reactions, OG Laurie Strode versus Rob Zombie Laurie Strode, who had the better emotional reaction to the Annie death, I think from an emotional standpoint, like a bit more realistic, I guess you could say, that Rob Zombie Halloween 2 Laurie had a much more genuine reaction to Annie's death. And granted, I mean, that reaction was warranted considering that Annie was just screwed up bad. Like, she was very, very bloody. I mean, if you want to have like a real emotional, gut-wrenching death scene and have somebody react to that, that is in the top 10, I would say, as far as reactions go.
Yeah, I completely agree, because it captured the like true essence of what a person would actually act like in that situation. They would be screaming, they'd be crying, they wouldn't be able to talk, they would be short of breath. Everything Scott Taylor Compton was, and there's just a whole nother layer of emotion added to it once you see Brad Dourif as the father come in there and see that his Annie, his own daughter, is dead right in front of him and died in a horribly brutal way, like he's talked about. And it really is a punch to like the balls. It is that heavy.
It's literally like a stab in the heart.
And and that's why, I've always talked about like the Halloween 2018 scene where the babysitter dies.
Yeah.
And then you see the little kid, he's like, "Oh shit!" and runs off.
Like, he was black though. He knew his black instincts kicked in. Like, oh shit, time to go.
Yeah. But I never liked that scene, and the reason why is I'm like, I would always watch a scene like what Rob Zombie did, or like what this movie did, and then I would look and say, like, those are genuine reactions to when a person dies.
Yeah.
When someone close to you is dying and is wanting your help, you're not just going to be like, "Oh shit," and then you're going to be like looking at the person, you're like, "Don't go in there, he's going to kill you, run," or something like that, and then you're running away or something. It's like no, I don't care if you're a kid. That's not how you act. The kids never acted like that in the first Halloween.
Yeah.
That is not how you're going to act. And so I've never been a fan of that, because it never felt real to me. While Halloween and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 did feel real.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of times for movies, you have to have that character that you can relate to. And, Laurie Strode in OG Halloween is really good. I will say that if you could have improved the scene, like making her a little bit more relatable, you take from Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 that reaction, have Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis pull that off. I mean, you'd have a pretty solid movie as far as having a balance between realism and realizing that, okay, this is a movie, things might be exaggerated, but yeah, I definitely agree that the reaction in Halloween 2, Rob Zombie, it was much more gut wrenching and realistic. So. But speaking of Laurie Strode, I wanted to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this again when we get into Halloween 2018 for our next review. Something that I sort of started analyzing with this film and then the 2018 film. So for this film, I equate this film to the first Terminator film, and here's why. If you look at the character arcs between Laurie Strode and Sarah Connor in their first films respectively, you have a very similar beginning and then continuation into the sequel. So both characters are young, naive, they're just worried about their everyday life. Then all of a sudden they're thrusted into this nightmare where a more experienced savior is showing up to, essentially save the day, stop the bad guy. In this case, for Halloween, it's Dr. Loomis chasing down Michael. In Terminator, it's Kyle Reese against the T-800. And I actually like this comparison. I was thinking about it for a while, pondering it and seeing the similarities, because there are a lot of similarities in the character arc, especially with Halloween 2018. So, by the end of the first film, both characters, Sarah Connor and Laurie Strode, have come to a realization point in their lives that, they're thrusted into a new mindset where they're going to come out stronger. They're going to come out more battle hardened. Sarah Connor was injured at the end of the first film, with her ankle because the T-800 was grabbing onto her. And Laurie Strode having the scar on her arm from Michael stabbing her. Then you get into the sequel, Halloween 2018 and Terminator 2. Both characters are older, and they're badasses with guns. Both have this sort of, it's not necessarily paranoia complex, but it's a more prepped mindset. They're both sort of isolated. They're more reserved in and of themselves. They both care for their family. In Sarah Connor's case, it's John. In Laurie's case, it's her daughter and granddaughter. There's a lot of comparisons that I can make with T2 to Halloween 2018, and then T1 with Halloween 78. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I actually made that comparison when I saw the Halloween 2018 trailer, and I saw that Laurie Strode was was literally killing it with the repeating shotgun, and when she was using the lever action rifle, why did I say shotgun? So basically, she just holy shit, she just went full blown Sarah Connor, and
yeah,
and she even looks like Sarah Connor in that movie.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
With the way her getup is in it, and
her little build though.
Yeah, and how she's built, how she has her hair, how she's dressed, everything kind of has a Sarah Connor vibe.
Yeah,
and you can definitely tell that David Gordon Green definitely took some inspiration from that because there was this girl who is a strong, powerful girl, but also is dealing with a lot. And trying to face off this evil, monstrous presence coming after her. It's very similar to Terminator, and I never really saw that comparison until you mentioned it. I saw the Sarah Connor comparisons with her, but the Terminator overall aspect, I never really got that until you mentioned it, and I can totally see that.
Now, when you watch those films, you'll be able to spot the similarities much better now.
Maybe I'll like it maybe I'll like the film even better now because Terminator's one of my all-time favorites. So maybe I'll like it even better.
Yeah, having that enhanced experience, looking at certain aspects of film that you didn't look at before. You go into a film that you love, and then you start looking at a different perspective. Then it gives you a more grand appreciation for what you're watching because you have a better understanding now. That's one of the things I really like about film reviewing and critiquing is that you can have a critical analysis of a film and have a certain amount of appreciation for it more so than you might have had on your first viewing because when you first see a movie that you know that you're going to like in the future, you remember that first experience and it's like, wow, this is amazing. And then you come at it years later looking at it from a critical point of view and analyzing it, and you have a lot more of an appreciation for it. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about reviewing films is that you get to talk about it with people, and then you start bouncing off ideas, and you're like, "Wow, I didn't think about that before." So and this film.
That's why when I review films, I don't like to review. I'll do sometimes quick reactions, but I don't like to review films right after I've seen it. I like to kind of give a little bit of time for me to process it and think about it and think about, okay, what is a critique here? What do I think about this and this type of situation? And I go all into that before I review. So then that way I feel like I'm giving the audience a fair review because I've had time to process my thoughts thoroughly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I earlier I wanted to talk about something with Dr. Loomis. So Dr. Loomis is I love this character a lot. Donald Pleasance gives off a really good performance. And a little bit of a fun fact, apparently Peter Cushing, who you guys will remember as Governor Tarkin from Star Wars A New Hope, he was originally supposed to be Dr. Loomis, but because he had been in Star Wars that previous year, he was apparently unavailable to play the role. So it was given to Donald Pleasance. And it's really interesting, just really quick, that the name of Sam Loomis is actually the name of a character in Psycho. Now, this is it. I'm pretty sure that this is just a coincidence, but in my sort of fan fiction dream world, so to speak, it will be really cool if the character of Sam Loomis from Psycho is the same Sam Loomis in Halloween. And if you think about it, the Sam Loomis in Psycho has experience with a sort of psychotic serial killer individual, right? So it would be an interesting character progression for that character to want to go into psychology and studying the mind of a serial killer to understand, because of a personal experience that he had with Norman Bates. And then you fast forward to 1978, and you have Michael Myers in a similar light. So that's just something interesting to ponder in the head. Little bit of a nod, if you will, because you can guess that John Carpenter was a fan of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
Not to mention, he took a page from Alfred Hitchcock. Though he said he wanted to have like a Hitchcock girl in there, and who else to play it than none other than Janet Leigh's daughter, Jamie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which
and you brought up Psycho, and you know, this is still on topic, but also I guess it's sort of derailing a bit, but not too bad. Is because this critic's, and we were talking about reviewing, so this fits too, but this is this critic's one of his favorite horror movies. And Roger Ebert, the famous critic, one of his favorite horror movies was Psycho. And, you know, he's been very kind of, you know, he's had a very loud voice when it comes to the horror genre. Mm-hmm. But when Halloween came out, it got panned. There was people, everyone hated it. It was not doing well when it first came out. But there was one reviewer that made the headlines, and that was Roger Ebert, and he gave it like a 100. He loved Halloween, absolutely loved it, and it was his review that sparked so many other people to check it out and watch it and see for themselves what he tried to see, and then it became this cult hit and everything like that for a lot of horror fans. And so I kind of always appreciated that he was able to have the respect he does for the film. So then it sparked conversation on a positive side from other people, because when a big critic like that says something along those lines, you're following, like, fans of that critic are gonna want to read his review, and they're saying like, wow, he really loved this movie, and so they want to go back and revisit it again, try to see if maybe they can see what he saw and all that. So that's just something kind of fun.
Well, you know, it's funny to mention that, because another John Carpenter film that got critically panned was The Thing. Back when it came out, people hated that movie so much. And I think one of the beautiful things about these films, especially ones done by John Carpenter, is that they age well. You know, some movies you can definitely say don't age very well. Some age better than others. I think that a lot of John Carpenter's films age very well, because he knew a lot of the old tricks. He knew what worked with horror movies. He knew what didn't work. Obviously, not every film is perfect, but I would say that Halloween and The Thing are among, you know, some of the greatest horror films of all time, because they're so and The Fog, they're really effective in making people scared, and it's just that subtle scare, because it's easy to look at something on a screen that goes blah, 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 you know, and it's like, oh, haha, you got me, jump scare, you know. But to have something that actually settles with you as time goes along, that's really effective. Just a quick little story. So, John Carpenter's The Fog is one of my first horror movies I've ever seen. It was a film that my parents loved to watch. They had it on DVD back in the early 2000s, and they had me watch it. That film genuinely scared the living daylights out of me. No lie. And to this day, I'm still scared of the film in a way. It's not the scariest film ever made, but there's something about it that still unsettles me. I love to watch it, and I will pop it in any day to watch it. But the film genuinely unsettles me in a good way. It was that much effective on me. It had such a long lasting appeal that even to this day, it still freaks me out. And I attribute that to John Carpenter and his effectiveness with telling good stories and really good with horror movies.
Yeah, and The Fog also, another brilliant performance by Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep.
And that is one of those that was highly effective. And if you want to talk about like even some of his more funnier type of movies, like They Live, you go into something like that, where I'm impressed that holds up so well. You have a WWE wrestler who starred in that with Rowdy Piper, and there's a famous line, "I came here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum." You know, and knowing how ridiculous these aliens look, it shouldn't hold up the way it does.
You're okay. This one, real fucking ugly.
It's like it holds up immensely, and that's part of it is the social commentary that he conveys in that film,
right?
And it helps to make it so timely in a way, and you know, and I really feel like that's how you can correlate Halloween as well, because Halloween is timely because of some of our crimes that have been happening as of late, and you watch it and you're like, oh shit, get the gun, I need to defend myself, something serious could happen to me, and it really makes it even scarier when you watch that. And They Live, I actually am kind of unsettled by it because of what it conveys, and that's supposed to be a horror comedy, which is so genius that he's able to balance that unsettling tone and comedic moments simultaneously.
Right. Yeah. One of the most effective things about Halloween is how realistic it is in a way. The way it conveys the survivor killer dynamic, that it's not, at least in your face, a supernatural monster, you know, like a vampire or a werewolf. This is a man that has the capability to kill people and show no emotion. That's what really freaks people out, is because, you know, you look at a werewolf movie or a vampire movie, oh, that's just fiction, that ain't never gonna happen. You'll be fine on the full moon, aside from any psychotics that are running around. But no fangs, no claws, you know, snouts. Yeah. So, but with Halloween, it's realistic in the sense that the killer, you know, could be anybody, and the killer can just do what we've seen in the movie. You could do that. You could be living your life, you know, just everyday life, ordinary, day to day, and then all of a sudden the killer comes into your town, and suddenly your entire world changes. And that's what I really like about Laurie Strode from Halloween to Halloween 2018 is the transition where, you know, she had 40 years to train and get prepared for the inevitable return of Michael Myers. And I do have a bit of a critique about what happens with Halloween 2018, but I'm, as much as I don't want to, I'm gonna save that for our actual review of Halloween 2018, because I do have a bit of like a rewrite, if you will, on how I would have done things just a little bit differently with Halloween 2018, just because the ending of this film is so legendary, and that effectiveness of the scares, and how they could have applied Halloween 2018 story properly, especially with how we see Laurie in that film. Just like with Terminator 2, you transition from a scared, timid, everyday girl to a prepper survivor who knows how to fight, who's good with guns, knows some really good tricks, has been preparing ever since, she first encountered Michael, and she's prepared for him. She's like, evil dies tonight, that line in Halloween Kills in the trailer, evil dies tonight. I mean, if you consider the whole story arc from this film to Halloween 2018 into Halloween Kills, it's a really good character piece. From going, you're evolving, and that, I mean, you could look at this as an empowering moment, that when you're so close to death, your life flashes before your eyes, suddenly your perspective changes on things. So you start doing things that you previously might not have considered doing before. You're doing it now, because, I mean, with the sequels that we got for Halloween, we'll take H2O. Okay, H2O is a little bit more, I wouldn't necessarily say cliche too much, but if you compare how Laurie Strode is 20 years later in that film from the first film or the first two films versus Halloween 2018, obviously the Halloween 2018 one is much better for me, because it shows that transition from somebody who has just experienced a life-changing event, and how their mindset changes to be more prepared, so that if the evil does come again, I'll be ready. So that's what I really enjoy about this film.
Yeah, and that's why, honestly, like, the first Halloween and Halloween 2018 kind of make a perfect double feature.
Yeah,
like if you were to sit down and just watch them both,
like an alternative timeline,
back to back. Yeah, it really is perfect, because you see the beginning of Laurie Strode's journey and the vulnerability there, and you see that in the first Halloween, and then you flash forward to Halloween 2018, and it's a seamless sequel, because now you see how, after you've seen what Michael's done to her, you now see how she is preparing to take him down. And it's just like a really beautiful, like, transition there.
Yeah.
And that they do for the character that I really dug.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking on some of the kills, what I find really interesting about this film is the lack of gratuitous blood, gore, or any of the typical horror tropes that you see in more of the 80s slasher films, like mainly Friday the 13th. So Friday the 13th is known for Jason, obviously. And with a Jason film, you're always expecting lots of blood and guts, over-the-top special effects, sex, nudity. You expect a lot of that. With this film, you do have some of that, but it's very toned down. I mean, essentially, this movie is like a PG-13 movie. Like, if you were to go off of the rating system today, it'll be considered a PG-13 movie, because there's barely any blood and guts, and you do see some nudity, but it's not like in your face type of sluttiness per se. It's very toned down, but the film is still great with that, because the scares, the blood and guts don't make a scary film. That's just part of the film, but it's those unsettling moments that we touched on earlier. But some of the kills are some of them are really effective. Others are a little funny, I guess you could say. I mean, you have when Annie's getting choked out. Obviously, it's a very unsettling moment, and every time I see it, I always do get a little squeamish, because it's like, you get into your car, all of a sudden there's somebody behind you. Yeah, but the thing is that kind of, yeah, and then her eyes is like, it's like, yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that moments like that take me out of the movie. It's just something I always get a chuckle about, and I don't mind it necessarily. I mean, if they edited it out, then it probably would be for the better in regards for keeping the movie on a more serious tone. But for me, it's like, well, yeah, it's a pretty weird moment, but it's fine. The same thing with when Michael stabs what's his name, Bob. Obviously, it's a kitchen knife. He stabs him through the chest, and he's just hanging there. It's like, huh? I never realized that the kitchen knife was that big. It's like, and being able to support his weight,
But even in that scene, they made it so effective because of that Michael Myers head turn and how it's like he's almost looking at like it's art, like he just
or like he's admiring his work.
Yeah,
like an artist admiring his work.
Or for me, he's like, huh? I never realized the kitchen knife was that strong. So, but I love that. A little bit of a funny, or not funny, but like an interesting story about the Michael Myers head tilt. I was always curious about that. So the Michael Myers mask is obviously it's a face mold of William Shatner. Now, from what I heard, there's a movie called The Devil's Reign, and William Shatner starred in that film. And the history of how they got the mask was that they literally picked up a mask from a store and they changed it because this was a low budget horror film, so they didn't make their own mask. But when I was watching Cinemassacre's review of this film, he was talking about how they took the mold on the set of The Devil's Reign, and there's like an interesting coincidence that in that film, which came out before Halloween did, I believe, William Shatner does the Michael Myers head tilt in that film, and then Michael Myers does the head tilt in the film too. So it's interesting coincidence that not only do they take the mold of William Shatner's face, but the same head tilt, is used. It's just something interesting, and if it wasn't done on purpose, then like Cinemassacre said, it's one hell of an eerie coincidence. So.
And sorry about that. And speaking of the mask, there was actually we actually saw this old film photo. It was like a photo of behind the scenes stuff and all that sort of thing. Like some people take photos when they're filming and sort of like a little diary or something. And there's actually a picture of Nick Castle with the Michael Myers mask on his head with a Dr. Pepper can, and it's like there you go. There you go.
Famous.
Yeah, and he's at, and then he actually recreated it though, and I just got a chuckle out of it. I was like, huh, who knew that the shape loved Dr. Pepper? Like,
good taste in soda, right?
Exactly.
Michael Myers has got some good taste in his beverage.
Exactly. Yeah. And and I even told him about not sponsored, but that Whataburger had this thing called a Dr. Pepper shake, and I said it'd be perfect for Michael Myers. I'm pretty sure that he would just be killing like the Flash, just like imagine just killing a bunch of people with a high speed sugar rush. But anyway, now there's actually a little funny but personal story of mine about Halloween when it came out, and I'm not sure if I forgot how it went though. I'm not sure if it was either in theaters or if it was on VHS. If you don't know what a VHS tape is, then you are really uncultured. I think it was in theaters, so that my mother, who was in college at the time, took a bunch of her friends, and they went to go see Halloween, and they were so scared they actually all spend the night together because it was that scary.
Yeah, I mean the film is very effective in scaring people, and
and I've always said this, and this is a good way to break down like Rob Zombie's films to what John Carpenter did. Is I've always said before that no matter what, a good movie is a good movie, right? You don't need to make a film gory to be good. You don't need to make a film super bloody to be good. You don't need to make a film have TNA in order for it to be good. That stuff will just be added in to either a bad movie or to a good movie. It all depends on how the writing is, how the execution is, how the directing is, and all of that. And so he finds a way to do something that has pretty much zero blood and just a little bit of nudity here and there. That's like quick flashes. And he finds a way to do that and show you that you don't need that stuff in your horror to make it good.
Right.
That you can literally just make a terrifying, simple premise. And that's what's so genius, is that it is so simple, and make just a terrifying, simple premise and use it on a minuscule budget and just go and film something, and it will make an impact on somebody in some way.
Right.
And this ended up making a significant impact, as we all see. And it's very much in comparison to that movie I mentioned earlier. That was the scariest movie I've ever seen, which is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Film has like zero blood in it. But like the way it's done is it's like the girl getting hung on the hook, and then you just see her screaming and her agonizing pain as she's like, screaming that's in her back. And then like the guy with his body twitching on the ground, like I talked about. Like those things like
After
that.
he gets hit in the head with a hammer.
After he just gets hit in the head with a hammer, and his body's just twitching
Convulsing.
and convulsing. It just makes it so much more terrifying to not have to see, like, if he was to whack his head and then all of a sudden it's like blood is pouring out while he's laying on the ground, he's doing this. It honestly would have taken me out of the scene more. It's because it's all about the execution of what he did, in what he was able to do in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The execution of it, that was so powerful. And the same with John Carpenter and Halloween. If you would have, made a super bloody scene when he stabs the guy and puts him on the wall, I was like, that would have been unnecessary.
Yeah, like they could have easily done like a shot where they would see the blood starting to drip down on the door. Yeah, trickling down. They could have easily done that, but they didn't. John Carpenter just had that scene that Bob is just hanging there and Michael Myers just does the head tilt. And, it's really effective in the creep factor because you're not distracted by the blood going down the door. You're focused on the fact that Michael is just looking at what he's done, almost like he's curious, And that's why whenever you have like discussions with horror fans on what is like effective as far as a horror movie goes, I think that most people can agree that like Friday the 13th isn't scary. It's the type of horror film that is more the fun over the top stuff that you have that typical slasher genre tropes and cliches, and it's all played for laughs mostly. You could say that the first Friday the 13th was a little bit more serious because they were trying to milk off of the success of Halloween. I mean, it was pretty obvious. They were using similar camera angles and a similar-esque premise about a killer stalking survivors, teenagers. And, of course, as the Friday the 13th films went on, the focus went on to Jason, and there wasn't too much story involved in most of the sequels. The only thing I would say as far as focusing on story and character development would be like Part 4, where you had a focus on Tommy Jarvis, and he would come back for 2 sequels. So you have these films that do have a focus on story, but Friday the 13th isn't known for its story. It's known for Jason, and it's known for the over-the-top death scenes and the nudity. I think that there's probably a podcast out there somewhere that specifically looks at nudity in movies and say, all right, which chick had the best boobs? That type of thing. And that's fine. If that's what you want to go see your horror movies for, that's fine. It's just, for a genuine horror film where you're actually scared, Halloween does that in spades, in that subtlety. It's not in your face. It's the subtle things that kind of freak you out, where it's like you see somebody down the road, and then you turn away, you look back, and they're just gone. That's unsettling because that's something that could happen. Somebody just looks at you, and then they disappear while you're not looking, and then you try and go find them, and there's just no sign of them. That's unsettling. And very effective as far as, scares go.
Yeah, and let's talk about the score. Sorry about that. Not a part of the Halloween theme, but, I think it's called Laurie's theme or something. The dun 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 dun. You know, like
Yeah.
the way it sounds. So it just sounds so. It's not menacing. It's just like it's
Eerie?
eerie. Yes, eerie. It just sounds so eerie that like you just want to know what's around the next corner. Like you don't know what's going on. Like he could be hiding in plain sight. You know, just stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I just love. Excuse me. I just love his music. I love John Carpenter's music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And first off, responding to what you said about story, what makes the first Howling film interesting is honestly it's very thin on plot. There's
Yeah.
really like almost no story there.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. It's kid kills his sister, killer. Oh, there's a babysitter, killer after babysitter. It's just like extremely simple. But that's what makes it a lot more effective. I feel is by it being so simple, and by
Yeah.
the lack of narrative for this type of film. And
Yeah.
you talk about the score and how I liked how you compared earlier in the stream. You were making a Jaws comparison, and I kind of compare the score to Jaws in a way because
Oh yeah, John Williams.
because Jaws did that perfect dun,
Yeah.
dun, and there's like certain parts of this where it's just two notes, like that one where he'd be like walking down the stairs or doing something, and you're like dun dun
Yeah.
dun,
Yeah.
dun,
Mm.
dun dun. There's those two
Yeah.
notes and stuff like that, and then or even when it's the main theme that do 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 do. Do, 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 do. That's only like a few notes here and there. That's
Yeah.
like barely anything. And it just repeats itself. And it makes it so effective in such a simple score, which is so fitting for something that's such a simple movie to make and such a simple premise. Which is yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, the soundtrack is great. I love John Carpenter's music, like regardless. I mean, obviously, Halloween for me was the first. Well, no, sorry, The Fog, because The Fog was the first horror movie that I had seen, and the music in The Fog is just, it is creepy as hell, and it's so good. I love the soundtrack from The Fog, so much so that I actually downloaded a video from YouTube where this person had a vinyl record of John Carpenter's The Fog soundtrack, and he had an entire like Halloween atmosphere in the video. And I would just sometimes I'll just sit there and listen to the music because it's so good, and I'll do that with the Halloween theme as well. The Halloween soundtrack is just phenomenal. It's creepy and very effective, and whenever I look at Rob Zombie's Halloween, I always get a little upset because sometimes they use the Halloween theme in that film at inappropriate times, and it's like oversaturated in a way. And it just, I mean, my thoughts on the Rob Zombie Halloween films are, I really don't like him, but I mean, I would try and give the films a chance because you have somebody that's trying to do something different, but in doing something different, they went off the mark on what made the original film so good. And one of those things is the soundtrack. It's you don't want to abuse a certain theme over and over again just for the sake of nostalgia. There is such a thing as having too much nostalgia to the point where you're just you're trying to appease the fans to get them to like your movie because, oh, remember this classic film that you liked when you were a kid? Well, guess what? It's back again. But at the same time it completely ignores the new film. It's like, well, if you're doing all this pandering to me for the classic film, then I'll just go watch the classic film, right? Instead of watching this new one. But back to the soundtrack. Another soundtrack that John Carpenter did that I really love is Escape from New York. I love that Escape from New York theme song. It's in our previous reviews on John Carpenter films, I always said that anytime John Carpenter does a film, I always point out the John Carpenter isms, I call them. The things that are always present in a John Carpenter film. One of the things is signature soundtracks, signature beats in his music. Another thing is the cinematography. Dean Cundey has done a phenomenal job and having all these elements that make the film so good. You have your soundtrack and you have your cinematography. It's all meshing together to make something so cool. Having those camera shots, whether it be in The Fog or The Thing, Escape from New York, Halloween. There's always those John Carpenter isms that make me very fond, of the different films that he's done in the past.
John Carpenter, Adrian
Yeah.
Barbeau, and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, John Carpenter regulars. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And fun fact, the if you remember in Halloween 2, the scene where the little kid is entering the hospital and he has that razor in his mouth? That's Andy from The Fog.
That's right. I forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I always love it when filmmakers will like recycle their cast mates and they'll kind of bring them on. Christopher Nolan does it all the time. Martin Scorsese does it a lot. Quentin Tarantino, other filmmakers like that. They'll reuse a lot of the same people that they have used in past movies, and I like that. John Carpenter does that with like Kurt Russell being in like 3 of his movies.
Yeah.
And then and as well as many other actors. So and talking about the music, I'm just curious to bring up like a versus here. Do you like the original Halloween score more, or do you like the score that John Carpenter still did, but in 2018 better?
Hands down, it would be just a draw because John Carpenter is a legend when it comes to his work, though. I mean, like, if he could capture lightning in a bottle once, he could probably do it again. And not to mention that there are some, like, he experiment in the 2018 version. He experiments in making these weird sounds, though. Except, like, I know that one of the nerdy kids that was the best friend of Laurie Strode's granddaughter's boyfriend that got killed was actually when like the sound of him dying, like there was this weird sound. It was actually like a bow string, like a bow, when you play on the cello, being drug against an electric guitar, which is very clever. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, which one would I prefer? I think I would prefer the original for a few reasons. One, when I compare Halloween to Halloween 2018, I prefer the original. I'm not saying that the Halloween 2018 isn't a good film, but if I had to choose between the two, it would be the original one. There was just so much effective about that film. The thing about the soundtrack for Halloween 2018 is that it does fit the film very much, because the film actually reminded me a lot more of Rob Zombie's Halloween in regards for the tone and just the overall aggression of Michael. Like, there's a lot more bloody kills in Halloween 2018, and it reminded me a lot of Rob Zombie's Halloween. And the soundtrack was really good for Halloween 2018, but it didn't creep me out like the original Halloween did. So if I was going for scares and something that made me unsettled, Halloween 2018 got me a little bit more pumped up, if you will, like more excited, compared to the original Halloween score, which was much more soft and creepy and subtle. So for me, it really does depend on the individual and what mood they're in as far as what they like about the Halloween franchise. Do you like a more aggressive Michael Myers where things are a little bit more amped up? Or do you like the more subtle, creepy things like Halloween or Halloween 2 even? Halloween 2 had some genuine creepy moments as well, although the thing that always threw me off was the new iteration of the Halloween theme for Halloween 2. Yeah, I mean, the difference in that theme song alone versus the original, it kind of sets the tone for that film. I mean, don't get me wrong, Halloween 2 still has its creepy moments, and they did amp up the kills a little bit more than in the first one, but I still think that as a personal choice, I would say that I prefer the original Halloween soundtrack, and that's just me.
And it's also about too, like, what kind of fits, because when you're watching the original Halloween, the soundtrack fits better when you're watching it because
Right.
of how it goes with the movie, like the little two notes as he's in the house, stuff like that. But then but then you can actually sit back and you can just listen to the Halloween 2018 score, and
Yeah.
it's really, really great. So, so I feel like, one's probably better listening to, and that would be like by itself, and that'd be like Halloween 2018. But one fits better into the movie, and well, I guess that's wrong wording, but it kind of works very well in the movie, and that is the Halloween original score. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. As far as like in comparing, eventually we're gonna do a podcast episode about comparing remakes to originals, and I'd love to do a Halloween and Halloween 2 versus Rob Zombie's Halloween and Halloween 2, just as far as comparing which ones were more effective at what the movies were trying to do. Because if you analyze both sets of films, the different directors are going to come with different tones and different goals when they're trying to present their film. So, I mean, I think a lot of people would probably say that if, they had to pick between the original Halloween and the remake, most people would go with the original because of how good it was. Of course, it all depends on your sort of personal taste, I suppose, on what you're in the mood for. Because you compare original Halloween to Rob Zombie's Halloween, and from a tone perspective, they're completely different. Like the difference is night and day. You have something that's a little bit more rough around the edges, much more brutal, whereas the original Halloween is much more subtle with what it's presenting. I mean, for me, I'll always take the original Halloween because it's just that masterpiece of a film. And even the sequels, sometimes the sequels feel a little bit off, and that's just natural because you're gonna have different directors doing the films, and there's always going to be a different feeling. You know, as the sequels go along in the Halloween timeline, going from 4 through to uh, Halloween 6, it's so jarring to see the transition, and that's why I can see why people might have wanted a remake of the Halloween franchise, because after Halloween 6, people were just like, yeah, this is going nowhere fast, you know. I mean, so what do you guys think about the sequels? Just like going off track just a little bit. I mean, I know Michael, you said that you actually really like Halloween 4, and I would share in that because there are definitely parts of Halloween 4 that I really enjoy. Like for example, the opening. The opening of Halloween 4 is definitely effective.
It's my favorite opening in the franchise, honestly, and it doesn't even have the theme or anything like that. But just seeing the fall setting and seeing like like out of every Halloween film in the franchise, when I watch Halloween 4, I get the most in the season for Halloween.
Yeah.
That's the film that gets me the most in the season. More than Halloween 2018, more than the original Halloween, more than any of those. That Halloween 4 just is so rich in its fall atmosphere that I just absolutely love it. And sure, the mask, looks like shit, and all that, like what people complained about. But what I liked about it, and what I'm worried about, Halloween Kills is, at least in this film, in Halloween 4, even though they did bring back Michael Myers, And I was like, okay, they brought him back after an explosion. Really?
And Dr. Loomis.
Yeah. Even
Yeah.
though they brought him back, they found a way to, at least with Michael Myers, make it realistic in the sense that that you could tell he was burnt. He had the dope ass
Facial scar.
facial tissue thing around his face.
Right.
But then he had to, from scratch, he had to go and pick up a new jumpsuit and kill a guy for a new jumpsuit, and then he had to go to a freaking random Dollar Tree or whatever and get himself a new mask. And so it's just
Which looks silly.
So it's just it's one of those guys where it's like, oh, I'm desperate. I need to get my get up. I need to get my look in here. And that's why I would have loved it. Like I mentioned in the last podcast, if in Howling Kills, I know we don't want to see like a naked Michael Myers or whatever, but like, but like it would have made sense because he was in a fire. Apparently his clothes are indestructible now. I didn't know that. Because apparently he still has his clothes intact after he walks out of the fire in the Halloween Kills trailer. And I'm like, it would have made sense for him to be naked or have something like that and lose his mask. And then he kills a firefighter, steals the firefighter's costume, wears his costume, disguises as a firefighter so he can kill more firefighters.
Yeah.
And then he goes and then eventually finds another mask and finds another jumpsuit as the movie goes along.
Yeah.
And like something more grounded and realistic like that would have been, I think, the way to do it. And I respected Halloween for trying to take that more grounded approach. And I liked how they ended things with Jamie, who did Daniel Harris giving one of the best child performances of all time.
Yeah.
I liked how they ended it with setting up her as the killer. That was like the one thing I absolutely just loved. And then they eventually scrapped that idea.
Yeah, and it is a shame because one of the issues was that Michael Myers really just lost his potency in regards for intimidation and fear factor. After Halloween 4, things just sort of went downhill. Halloween 5 had Michael Myers appear too much, and it wasn't actually Michael Myers appearing, it was people in a Michael Myers costume, and that sort of just saturated the audience in like, oh, hey, look, it's Michael Myers again. Oh, but it may not actually be Michael Myers. It might just be some dumbass in a costume, right? So the fear factor is lost, and it is a shame that they didn't go with Jamie being the new Michael Myers, so to speak. The curse lives on, if you will, and one of the things that I am curious about with Halloween Kills is what are they going to do with Michael that's going to be any different from everything else that we've gotten so far, including the Rob Zombie films, because in all the films, they never could establish why Michael can take all the damage that he's taken. They haven't explained much of anything in regards for him personally. They explain in the sequels why he kills his family because of the druid curse and the sacrificial roots of Halloween, but that still doesn't explain why Michael can take bullets to the chest, fall off great distances, survive an explosion, walk out on fire, and still be alive. And that's why I too share your concerns about Halloween Kills, because again, he's walking out of a burning house, and he was submerged in that thing. He was trapped in the basement, and the fire just, okay, and obvious, and this is a film, this is a movie. It's not meant to be realistic, but you still have that sense of what you're willing to tolerate in regards for suspension of disbelief, because the one thing that Halloween 2018 didn't do, again, is that they didn't explain why Michael can take so much damage and still be okay. Now, this is Halloween 40 years later, okay? Michael Myers is much older, okay? And, he is still able to do things that he did when he was younger. He's still able to kill people in very gruesome ways. And once again, the argument would be, well, it's just a movie, so you shouldn't think about it too much. But the thing is that when you have a movie and you have a universe that this movie is set in, you're going to see, whether subtly or in your face, that there are a set of rules in this universe that you establish. The best example, or the simplest example, could be that you have a superhero that has a set of skills or a set of powers. So let's say that the superhero has the power of water. All of his abilities are based on water alone. Okay? And throughout the first film, you see this. You see how he has his powers, how he uses his powers. Then you get a sequel, and he's fighting the next supervillain or whatever, and all of a sudden, he pops out with fire abilities. And you ask, well, wait a minute. I thought that the first movie established that he only uses water. But all of a sudden, he has the abilities of fire, and then the film doesn't explain that, so you're left further confused. So that's how I'm looking at Halloween right now, that the first film left the door open that, okay, Michael is human, but there's something more to it, because he's taking a lot of damage and he's still going. And that's why I really like this film, because they left that door open that if they wanted to do a sequel, then the sequel could maybe explain some things, but still leave the mystery, right? Because you don't want to have everything revealed to you, because otherwise that's going to spoil your enjoyment of the first film, right? If you have everything explained to you, it ruins that mystery. And I guess that's sort of the mentality they're going with for these films, is that they don't want to explain how Michael Myers can take so much damage, but, I mean, in Halloween 2018, he gets his fingers blown off, right? And then in Halloween Kills, he's walking out of a burning house, and he just keeps trucking.
Keeps on trucking.
Yeah. First off, I do want to talk about your comment on, yeah, it's just a movie or whatever. But there are some movies that are so grounded in realism. And when you're trying to ground it in such a realistic way, it's sort of like, I don't know how I can take this seriously. And, there's a few things too, and even movies that don't take itself too seriously all the time, while the film I'm about to compare does. Take, for example, I'm doing my 12 Days of Chucky thing on YouTube. I watched Code of Chucky last night. There's one thing that always bothers me in that film, all the time, and people would look at me and they'd be like, dude, it's just a movie. You need to calm down. It's just a movie. But there's one thing that always bothers me, is that it takes place in a mental hospital, and there's no video cameras here. Are you kidding me? Because they keep on saying, oh, Chucky did it. Chucky was the one that did it. Chucky did it. I swear he did it, and all this stuff. I'm like, you're in a mental hospital. Literally walk into the comms room, turn on the cameras, and then boom, you'll see a killer doll walking around stabbing people. I'm like, it's as simple as that. And then they gave some BS excuse saying, oh, well, for backstage security, we don't have security cameras in here. I'm like,
you incompetent motherfucker.
I'm just like, and I'm like, well, so you're a mental hospital with crazies, a bunch of crazies, and you're telling me you don't have video cameras in there? Like, what the hell? And that bothers me so much. Just
I can relate to that, because Halloween 2 has security cameras in a regular hospital. This isn't a mental hospital. This is just a straight up hospital. You have a security team there. Most security systems or security guards, they're going to have cameras staged around wherever it is they're doing security at. That's just par for the course when you have security, for the most part. So, yeah. So I can definitely understand why you would be upset that Cult of Chucky doesn't have security cameras in a mental institution. That will be like one of the biggest places that you would want to have security cameras, because of the dangerous people you have in there.
Exactly, and stuff like that could just be such a hindrance. But for me, I guess what they're trying to convey in Halloween is that, with what Loomis says when he saw a kid who had the devil's eyes these pale eyes. And all this. I think they're trying to describe him. Like, there's a reason why they call him the Shape or something like that. Is I think they're trying to explain that he's just the pure essence of evil.
Yeah.
And that's just like what he's supposed to be. Like, in a way, they're almost trying to, that's like their explanation for it very subtly. I think they're trying to tell us that maybe he's not human. That
Not
he's
entirely, yeah.
that he's just kind of like the pure, just unadulterated definition of evil.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're just trying to find that as a way to convey how all of this stuff, how he can get his fingers blown off, and how he can get stuff like that done to him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's a pretty good explanation, and it's subtle because you don't really need too much detail. It, Halloween is very effective because it's not in your face about a lot of things. It's very, John Carpenter is known for his subtlety, and anytime you watch a John Carpenter film, you always got to pay attention to the subliminal messages, because that's where you really can enjoy a film, when it has those little subtle things that only eagle-eyed viewers are going to pick up on. And I love watching movies, to find those things. So
there was also I noticed that there was some sort of a reference in Halloween 2018 when Laurie blows Michael's fingers off with a shotgun. Like, he doesn't like we see a portion of his fingers just like blown off, and I just get like Friday the 13th Part 4 vibes. Remember when who was it? I think Tommy's sister
right.
stabs him in the hand with a machete, and it's like, oh
yeah,
and like, but not to mention though that Jason Voorhees, he was human. He's human though until he comes back as himself. But we don't, and it doesn't mention that in the sequels, like the 2018 version, that he doesn't have the mark of Thorn. Like, he doesn't have that. That idea is just thrown out the window. Not to mention the new timeline. But there's just no way that a guy that's just there's no way, he's been shot, he's been stabbed, he's got his fucking fingers blown off, he doesn't feel any pain or anything. It's what is this guy like? What kind of drugs is he on? Is he on bath salts or anything?
I want what he's smoking.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially if you can stay in a burning house and not have your clothes catch fire. I mean, they obviously had to do something to make him look different for Halloween Kills, because having that same look might get a little old. I mean, I like how his mask was withered in Halloween 2018. It was showing that there was a progression in the age of the film and the timeline. So his mask is a lot more withered. It's old. And then of course for Halloween Kills, the mask is burned. But it would have been nice. Yeah, it would have been nice if the mask was a lot more damaged than they have it, because we're almost getting a Halloween 2 scenario where you're in Michael Myers is in an explosion, okay, and his entire body's on fire, okay. Now with Halloween Kills, there wasn't necessarily an explosion, but dude, you're in a burning house. The last shot we see, he's engulfed in flames. Now, granted, he was gone from the stairs from when they locked him in at the end, versus when they go back on the camera shot where he was standing, he's gone. Okay, so obviously he's moved, but he gets engulfed in flames. Okay, and on top of that, he's still in the house, and the firefighters have to go to the house and they start putting out. But he walks out, and the house is still on fire, and he's aside from his mask and his fingers, he's practically unharmed, and it's weird.
Yeah, and real quick too, you mentioned his mask is indestructible. Apparently, he's just like every badass woman in those action movies where their hair doesn't get singed in explosions or anything like that. Because even he keeps the hair on his mask.
Yeah,
hair. He's no bald Michael Myers. Oh, look, there's a bald Michael Myers going around. That's interesting. That's cool. That's unique. Nope, he keeps all of his hair intact. It's not singed. It's not anything. And he was engulfed in flames. And then, the mask, sure, it's made out of some rubber material. Maybe he would keep that. But, like, his jumpsuit is cloth. It's going to burn.
Yeah.
Unless it's the type of jumpsuit worn by NASCAR drivers that don't catch on whenever they're in a burning car, they don't catch fire.
Yeah, but
that type of jumpsuit.
I mean, the thing is, though, is that he got it from a mechanic. So it's not.
Is there a possibility a mechanic could have some said jumpsuit?
Yeah, maybe, but I mean, then you're starting to make you're starting to write the movie for the writers, trying to write it off as why this doesn't make any sense. I mean, look, I'd like to see a battle damage Michael Myers. Why? Because it's something completely different from what we got. Like, for example, one thing I do approve of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is Michael Myers' mask has deteriorated a lot. And he, that it shows a progression of time and that the mask is just old and weathered down. And then, you would expect that for this Michael Myers because he's in a burning house. His clothes need to be damaged a lot. Like, look, you don't have to have him completely burned on the body, but show that the arms, some of the chest, some of the legs. I mean, show that there is a progression of damage to say that this guy is walking through fire. He's not immune to fire. Obviously, his outfit is not immune to fire. And because we're not talking about a supernatural killer that was born in fire, and therefore is immune to fire. This is supposed to be a somewhat normal guy that is just really good at taking damage and continuing to move on. So, I mean, and to be honest, I don't think that we're going to get a proper explanation as to why Michael can do what he's doing. I think that it's gonna be the same thing that we've seen before. I'm hoping that they do some kind of crazy twist, but I don't know if they will.
Yeah. And, and what is it that we love about our heroes? When we look at our heroes, they are in a very vulnerable state. You compare someone like a character like John Wick. John Wick gets his ass kicked a lot in those movies, and you're like worried. You're like, holy shit, he just got stabbed. He's bleeding out. And you, as the person, you're worried. You're like, oh my god, how's he gonna get out of this? Oh man, now he's getting punched in his knife wound. So you're like freaking out.
Or like John McClane in Die Hard, the first Die Hard though, like he not to mention that elevator shaft or that ventilation shaft, like when he falls down, he grabs onto like a ventilation shaft. Like in real life though, you would have broken fingers and you would have fallen down that shaft. You would have been dead.
Yeah, Mythbusters actually proved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like same I think needs to be said for our villains, to where you show that they're maybe a little bit more powerful than our hero to make them more scary. But then you also show something that's like make them also vulnerable and be able to have a vulnerable state and be able to be actually beaten. And so our heroes can win. Like, take for example, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger. This is a man who freaking can go into your dreams and kill you
in your sleep,
and in your sleep, and all this stuff. That's OP as shit. That's so powerful. But then Wes Craven managed at the end, because he showed that Freddy Krueger coming out of the dream world, being human, he's not as strong. So then Nancy had the ability to be able to trick him and use a bunch of booby traps on him and burn him and do all this stuff to him. And he was weaker. And just a little bit of a subtle explanation there. It was just being like, oh, well, okay, he's just not stronger in the real world. That was just something enough to give us to know where his weaknesses lie.
Yeah, not to mention that if you could take him out of the dream world and bring him into reality, he's vulnerable. Or if you don't think about him, he loses power. Like in Freddy vs. Jason, though, like because people because when he tries to kill people, they just he tries to kill someone, but it doesn't work though because they don't remember him, and some people say it's taboo, don't mention his name though. It's sort of it's like Lord Voldemort, do not say his name, you do not say his name, something like that though. You don't mention him, because if you forget about him, he will probably get weak and he'll die.
Right.
Like Freddy Krueger.
Right. So as we begin to wrap things up here, what are your final thoughts on Halloween, especially as we're getting closer to Halloween Kills? We'll be talking about Halloween 2018. I always like to do in retrospect type deals when you have an entire set of movies that you can watch and you can evaluate the story, from point A to point B and onward. So, as far as a standalone film and then a film that is in connection with sequels, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts on Halloween are, what we covered here and what like you said, what can we say that hasn't already been said? It's a classic. It's absolutely one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and it's celebrated amongst all of us in the horror community for a reason. I get that Psycho is the granddaddy of all slashers, but honestly, we would not get a majority of the slashers we have today if it was not for that first Halloween film.
Exactly.
That really started the trend of the modern slasher.
Yep.
And so we would not have gotten Friday the 13th. We would not have gotten Nightmare on Elm Street, Chucky. Yeah. None of those would have ever come if it was not for that Halloween film to show. Psycho came. It's oh, this is an interesting, this is an interesting genre. And then Halloween comes, and you're oh, we can work with this. We can actually do something with this.
Yeah, we got something.
And that's when it became more popular.
Right.
And so I think John Carpenter was able to make something that truly is timeless, and even through all of its cheesy moments that you talked about and stuff like that, that we can overlook stuff like that for just the influence that this movie has had on our pop culture for years and will for years to come.
Mm-hmm. My thoughts exactly. And the only way I see this, if it wasn't for John Carpenter, we wouldn't have a lot of good horror movies though. Just basically Halloween is basically jump started the slasher films. So okay, imagine if the slasher genre was a car battery, or was a car with a dead battery, and this movie was the car or the thing to help jumpstart the car, and if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have a bunch of good stuff though. So basically, there are some moments though where it looks cheesy though for a movie made in the late 70s. Not to mention it was the age of that disco disco flair and just stuff like that. It was that age though.
Yeah.
And and I want to say too that nowadays you go to films today, and if there's a film today in today's age that is panned by audiences and critics, it doesn't have the same, years later, it'll be, looked at differently. A film doesn't seem to really have that kind of impact anymore. It was, but the first Halloween was so powerful that it was panned, like we mentioned, it was panned by many people when it first came out, and then people started doing a whole 180.
Yeah.
And we don't see that anymore. And that's something that only this type of film, and some of the films prior or afterwards, were able to accomplish. So.
I will say this to comment on what you were talking about with films that get critically panned by critics and audiences alike these days. Is I think that a lot of today's movies don't have that same spark of creativity and passion behind it. That's not to say that all movies are like that these days, because there are definitely movies that are really good. And the thing is that those films, like your Halloweens and other films like even Star Wars, that there was a certain spark of creativity and passion behind those projects. That's lacking so much in today's cinemas. One film that was a pleasant surprise for me was Malignant. Malignant felt like a return to a classic horror film. It had a very simple premise. It had a really good plot twist. I don't want to go into spoilers in case nobody here has seen it, but I would highly recommend seeing Malignant because it was that good old-fashioned horror film that didn't need to break new ground. I think that there's a lot of films that are trying to aim really high to be the best of the best, but films like Halloween weren't trying to be the best of the best. They were just trying to tell a very simple story. Like you said earlier, Wolfman, this film is very simplistic. The plot is essentially paper thin, yet it was still really good. It was really well done. Yes, it has some objective flaws, but I have to say that this film, it's very well made. And the passion behind the project, and because it had a good director at the head of it all, is why it is so good and why it still holds up today. A lot of people know the face of Michael Myers. At the same time, a lot of people don't know why he's so popular. I'm pretty sure that there are people that don't like Halloween. They say, oh, this is just a dumb, cheap horror film. And, obviously you're entitled to your opinion. I'm not saying that you can't have that opinion. It's just understand that this film has a legacy, because if it wasn't for Halloween, then we wouldn't have our modern day slashers. And the evidence is there. You've had so many knockoffs of Halloween. Friday the 13th is technically a knockoff. Obviously, it did some things different, and I'm talking about the original Friday the 13th, the very first one. Obviously, Sean Cunningham was heavily inspired by Halloween. Who wasn't? It was very effective in regards for a horror film, and so they tried to replicate it. Of course, with Friday the 13th, they went in a different direction, and that's good because you don't want to copy a great original and just be known as a knockoff. Yes, the original Friday the 13th was heavily inspired from Halloween, but when you compare the Friday the 13th franchise to the Halloween franchise, there is a lot of differences. And Friday the 13th made its own legacy, and that's because Halloween did what it did, and it was that effective horror movie. And that's why I love it so much. This is one of my favorite films of all time. Definitely my top 10 movies overall, because it is that good. And that's why I'm a little bit more heavy-handed and critical of the sequels, because you have the legacy that this film made, and you have some good sequels. At least some parts of sequels that were good, like Halloween 4. There could have been things that could have been done differently to make that film better, but out of all the sequels, I'd say that it's the better of the bunch. That's just me. Halloween 4, like we discussed earlier, had a very effective start, and there was so much to like about that film, even though there were some parts that were weird and inconsistent, but it was still a quality film, and it's because of that legacy that the first film left. That's why, I kind of feel bad for Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, because that film was critically panned by fans because it didn't have Michael Myers. For me, the one change I would have made was that it was in the same universe as Michael Myers was. And if they really wanted to have like a larger narrative, they could say that Michael Myers' mask had some connection to Silver Shamrock in some way. It could be seen as predictable if they did that, but I really enjoy Halloween 3 for what it is. And my only criticism is that it should have been in the same universe as Michael Myers. It would have been nice for a sort of anthology series, sort of like Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat is an anthology series, and they're all separate stories, but they're all in the same world. And I just kind of like the idea of shared universes. That's why I would still love to see a Michael Myers versus Jason, even though it'd be completely ridiculous. There is a fan film that has that, and that's actually pretty cool. But yeah. So, but as far as Halloween goes, top 10 films of all time, one of the most effective horror movies. It's started a legacy that's still going on to this day. And I am looking forward to Halloween Kills, even though I have my reservations and concerns about it. I'm still excited to see what they're going to do and how they're going to honor the legacy that first film has, established. So, oh yeah. So, but I'm very excited to get into Halloween 2018 next time, and as always, Wolfman, you are more than welcome to join us for that. We're having a lot of good discussions. Sucks that Kyle wasn't able to make it back in, but guys, but guys, for everyone listening, make sure you guys check out Wolfman's channel, Mega MovieZ, on YouTube. Also, make sure to check out Fletts House of Horror, because both of these guys are putting out amazing content. And for us podcasters and YouTubers, Halloween is a very exciting time. We got lots to talk about. Wolfman's been doing a great series of watch-alongs for the Chucky films, and that's been pretty entertaining. It actually is inspiring me to go watch those films because I've only seen the first two. Those are the first. Well, okay, I've seen the first two, and then I've also seen the remake. I've obviously, out of the three that I've watched, I prefer the first two over the remake. The remake it's kind of cool, but I definitely like Brad Dourif's. He's very effective with the crazy voice and stuff. So I really enjoy that. Oh, dude, I love Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill. Yes, absolutely. He definitely had an interesting spin for Chucky. Anyway,
but yeah, it's definitely. I'm actually impressed at how many people have said they've that I've talked to whenever I'm doing the series, who I've talked to saying they like the remake even more than the original, and I'm like always kind of, in shock when I hear that. So I'm like,
yeah.
Wow.
I think that the reason is because there's a lot more of a. It appeals more to modern audiences than the original, obviously because they're set in different time periods. On top of that, you have the idea of AI and social media and Wi-Fi connecting everything. You have Wi-Fi that connects to your refrigerator. It's like I never knew I needed Wi-Fi to connect to my refrigerator, and I'm glad that I don't have a Wi-Fi connected refrigerator, because I don't need it. I'm more old-fashioned in that way. But I mean, as far as comparing the remake versus the original, I'll always take the original because it was so much more effective. I mean, the remake can appeal to more modern audiences, which is why it's probably being that's probably why people like it more than the original, because it's cell phone use, Wi-Fi, modern technology, they connect to it. But for me, the original, it's better. It's a lot more of a creepy film. Chucky is very menacing in that film, so but I'm enjoying your series and covering the films. It's great. And
yeah,
I can't wait to.
It's been long and exhausting, for sure, but it's definitely worth it. And I'd be curious to hear, because it was funny. Yeah, whenever I mentioned that cult thing, I could tell you didn't see it because you were just completely flabbergasted when I talked about how a mental institution does not have video cameras.
And see, I do pay attention to those little things because, again, somebody say, "Oh, it's just a movie. Why are you being so critical about it?" But my response to that is, yes, I'm a consumer of these products, but I'm not a blind consumer. I don't just take what is being given to me and just just blindly accept it, because that, then I go back to They Live. They Live, you have people that just blindly consume things. And, that film has obviously a social commentary on that mindset. And for me, it's, I take care and pride in what I watch, because I have some self-respect as a person, and I'm not going to blindly accept something because, it's part of a favorite franchise that I like. And we're going to be talking about stuff like this on the War on Pop Culture, which is why I'm excited to get into it, because there's so many things, so many subjects to cover in this war that we're in on pop culture. But I'm very excited to get into that. But that'll do it for today's episode, or tonight's episode, depending on when you're listening and or watching this. But thank you to Kyle Curtis Flett, and thank you to Wolfmann for coming on again. It's great having you on. Hopefully we'll be able to get Kyle back for the next episode. I know that he's planning on doing a Halloween live stream. He also has a birthday stream coming up next week, so that's very exciting. And with that all being said, thank you guys very much for listening. And until next time, fellow investigators and fellow special agents, remember, the entertainment is out there.